Earth as we know it, a jewel of blues and greens swirling in the velvet dark, is a profound illusion. Beneath that delicate surface lies a history etched in fire and chaos, a testament to forces so immense they dwarf human comprehension. We stand on a world still bearing the scars of its violent birth, a world that once was a molten inferno, a cosmic foundry where the very elements of existence were forged. To understand our present, we must first confront this unfathomable beginning, a period so alien and extreme that it strains the boundaries of imagination. In the grand, indifferent tapestry of the cosmos, our solar system coalesced from a swirling nebula of dust and gas. Gravity, the silent sculptor, began its inexorable work, drawing matter together. Planets emerged not as placid nurseries, but as incandescent spheres, their surfaces a roiling sea of liquid rock. Earth, our home, was no exception. Imagine a world born not of gentle accretion, but of cataclysmic collisions. This was the Hadean Aeon, a time so ancient, so utterly devoid of recognizable life, that it feels more like myth than history. And real quick, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more videos. Now let's keep going. The young Earth was a furnace. Heat from its formation, coupled with the constant barrage of planetesimals, the building blocks of worlds, kept its entire mass molten. There was no solid crust, no stable ground, only a suffocating atmosphere, thick with volcanic gases, and a surface that flowed and churned like a cosmic cauldron. What would we breathe on such a world? What would we see? Perhaps only the glow of molten rock and the searing light of distant, young stars. But even in this inferno, the seeds of something new were being sown. The sheer energy of these impacts, the ceaseless hammering, was not just destructive. It was also transformative. Deeper within the planet, immense pressures and temperatures were at work, separating the fundamental elements that would later form our world. Iron, heavier and denser, sank to the core, leaving behind a mantle of silicate rock. This differentiation, this sorting of materials, was a crucial step in Earth's journey from a chaotic ball of matter to a planet capable of harboring something beyond mere geology. But the surface remained a landscape of unimaginable violence. The relentless impacts were not just adding mass, they were also delivering something vital, something that would eventually bring forth life. The Hadean Aeon was not a time of peaceful growth. It was a period of relentless cosmic violence, a perpetual storm of debris that hammered the young Earth. This era, aptly named the Great Bombardment, lasted for hundreds of millions of years. Every impact was an explosion, a searing flash that vaporized rock and gas, adding to the already hellish atmosphere. It was a world where the very concept of a stable surface was a distant dream, where new mountains could be born and erased in the blink of an eye. Yet within this fury, a subtle delivery system was at work. The same comets and asteroids that rained down destruction also carried a precious cargo: water. These icy visitors, originating from the colder, outer reaches of the solar system, delivered vast quantities of water, frozen or as vapor, to our scorching planet as the Earth began to cool slowly, agonizingly. This delivered water could finally accumulate. Imagine the scene. The molten surface, once a uniform inferno, began to solidify in places, forming a nascent crust. And onto this cooling rock, the water began to pool. Not the vast, inviting oceans we know today, but steamy, corrosive seas under an atmosphere thick with carbon dioxide and methane. The sky would have been a perpetual twilight, perhaps tinged with the hues of volcanic sulfur. The air would have been toxic, the pressure immense. This was the birth of Earth's first oceans, a primordial soup brewed in a crucible of unimaginable heat and pressure, a dark and alien sea. But even in this hostile environment, a change was stirring. The relentless bombardment continued, shaping the very composition of the planet. Yet the presence of liquid water, however alien, was a fundamental shift. It provided a medium, a solvent for chemical reactions that would lay the groundwork for a revolution, a transformation that was not yet visible, not yet even conceived. The oceans were forming, but they were merely a stage. The players were yet to arrive, and they would emerge from the very elements that had delivered the water. The earth, having survived the fiery birth and the incessant bombardment, was slowly beginning to cool. Its oceans, born of cosmic ice, now churned under a sky choked with volcanic gases. It seems an unlikely cradle for life, a place where the very conditions for existence appeared antithetical. Yet it is precisely in these extreme environments that the most profound discoveries about life's origins still lie hidden. The prevailing thought, the one that echoes through the sterile halls of science, is that life arose not through divine intervention, but through the remarkable alchemy of chemistry, abiogenesis, the spontaneous generation of life from non-living matter, is a concept that still stirs a primal sense of wonder and a touch of unease. Imagine no blueprints, no divine spark, but rather a slow, chance arrangement of molecules in the warm, mineral-rich waters of the early Earth, perhaps near hydrothermal vents, spewing forth chemical energy. Simple organic compounds began to form. Amino acids, the building blocks of proteins, then nucleotides, the building blocks of DNA. These molecules, in the right conditions, could self-assemble. They could form membranes, enclosing these precious chemical reactions, creating the first rudimentary cells. The earliest forms of life were not the complex organisms we see today. They were prokaryotes, ancient single-celled beings. Think of them as tiny, self-contained chemical factories, existing in a world not yet shaped by photosynthesis. They were anaerobic, meaning they thrived without oxygen, a gas that would have been poisonous to them. The thought of life arising ex nihilo from mere chemistry is a powerful one. It suggests that life is not a miracle bestowed upon a select few worlds, but a potential outcome of the universe itself. These first microbes, microscopic and unassuming, were the pioneers of our planet. They were the first to metabolize, to reproduce, to adapt, and their existence, however simple, was a monumental shift. But their silent, chemical work in the primordial oceans was slowly setting the stage for a transformation so profound it would reshape the very atmosphere of the planet. The early Earth was a world without free oxygen. The atmosphere, a thick blanket of methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide, was a far cry from the breathable air we take for granted. The life that had emerged, the humble prokaryotes, were perfectly adapted to this oxygen-poor environment. They breathed in the chemical soup and breathed out the waste products of their metabolism. For eons, this was the silent rhythm of the planet. But then, a new evolutionary marvel began to stir. Within the vast, ancient oceans, a group of prokaryotes, the cyanobacteria, discovered a revolutionary new trick. They learned to harness the energy of sunlight. They developed photosynthesis. This was not just a new way to get energy. It was a process that changed the world. As they absorbed sunlight, they also released a byproduct, a waste gas that was utterly transformative: oxygen. At first, this oxygen was a problem. It was toxic to most of the life that already existed. The early oceans, rich in dissolved iron, acted as a giant oxygen sink, absorbing the nascent oxygen and precipitating it out as iron oxides. These deposits, the banded iron formations we find in ancient rocks today, are the fossilized evidence of this slow, atmospheric transformation. They are like the rust on the planet, a testament to the planet's first, slow exhalation. This process took hundreds of millions of years. It was a gradual, almost imperceptible accumulation. The oxygen didn't flood the atmosphere overnight. It was a slow seep, a microbial exhalation that gradually, inexorably, began to change the very chemistry of the air. The life that had emerged in the darkness of an oxygen-free world was, through its own evolutionary success, ushering in an age of light and air. But this gradual change, this slow poisoning of the old world, was merely a prelude to an event that would redefine Earth itself. To truly grasp the impact of this accumulating oxygen, we must turn our gaze to the era known as the Great Oxygenation Event. Before the Great Oxygenation Event, before the air began to fill with a gas that would fundamentally alter life, Earth existed in a state of profound microbial dominion. This was the Archean Aeon, a span of time so vast it dwarfs human history into insignificance. It was a world not of grand landscapes and towering mountains, but of subtle, intricate chemistry and the relentless, silent work of single-celled organisms. Life, in its most rudimentary forms, was the architect of this nascent planet, patiently laying down the foundations for everything that was to come. Deep within the ancient rock record, we find the echoes of this earliest, most profound reshaping. Stromatolites, for instance, these layered sedimentary structures, are not mere geological curiosities. They are the fossilized blueprints of communities of microorganisms, primarily cyanobacteria, that lived in shallow seas and along coastlines. These tiny architects, through their collective metabolic processes, built these structures layer by layer, trapping sediment and precipitating minerals. They were like the planet's first gardeners, cultivating the very substrate upon which later life might evolve. Their presence, etched in stone, speaks of a planet teeming with a hidden, invisible life, a life that was already beginning to sculpt the Earth's surface with a patient, persistent hand. But the story of the Archean is not just about the microscopic. It is also about the slow, monumental birth of continents. The Earth's crust, still hot and volatile in its infancy, began to cool and consolidate. From this molten chaos, small fragments of crustal material, known as cratons, started to form. These were not the vast continental plates we know today, but rather the sturdy, stable cores, the bedrock from which future landmasses would eventually grow. Through a process of accretion, of these early fragments colliding and merging over eons, the seeds of continental stability were sown. These ancient cratons, like the shields of a warrior, represent the enduring strength of the early Earth, the unyielding foundations upon which the shifting tides of tectonics would later play out their grand dramas. The atmosphere of this Archean world was a stark contrast to our own. It remained largely anoxic, devoid of the free oxygen that is now essential for complex life. Instead, it was a dense soup of gases like methane, ammonia, carbon dioxide, and water vapor, conditions that would be utterly inhospitable to most present-day organisms. Yet, within this peculiar chemical environment, life not only persisted, but flourished. This era suggests a resilience in life, a capacity to adapt and thrive in conditions we would find utterly alien. It prompts us to wonder about the very origins of life and whether the surface, with its nascent photosynthetic exhalations, was truly the only cradle. Indeed, some of the most compelling theories about the origin and early persistence of life point to the deep sea, far from the sun's influence, around hydrothermal vents spewing mineral-rich fluids from the Earth's interior. Conditions were ripe for chemosynthesis. These vents, spewing out heat and chemicals, may have provided both the energy and the raw materials for life's earliest sparks. This deep sea vent hypothesis offers a fascinating counterpoint to surface-based origins, suggesting that life might have taken root in the crushing darkness, shielded from the harsh conditions of the early surface. To understand the full resilience of Archean life and how it teetered on the brink of a world-altering transformation, we must explore the forces that shaped its very beginnings, leading us into the deep, mysterious waters of the early oceans and their hidden chemical symphonies. This exploration into the microbial world and the formation of stable crust sets the stage for understanding the immense pressures that built up, leading to a dramatic shift in atmospheric composition. And to fully appreciate the consequences of this accumulating oxygen, we must now turn our attention to the immense forces unleashed in the Great Oxygenation Event. The quiet hum of early life might have continued indefinitely, a subtle chemistry unfolding in primordial seas, had it not been for a radical photosynthetic innovation. Cyanobacteria, those ancient architects of oxygen, began their prolific work, a slow exhalation that would fundamentally rewrite the planet's atmosphere. This was not a gentle transition, but a geological upheaval, a true purge. Imagine the Earth, then teeming with life, exquisitely adapted to a world devoid of free oxygen. For these anoxic organisms, oxygen was not the breath of life, but a potent poison, a corrosive agent that dismantled their delicate molecular machinery. The Great Oxidation Event, as it came to be known, was a catastrophe for the vast majority of life then in existence. Anaerobic metabolisms, perfected over eons, were suddenly rendered obsolete, leading to mass extinctions that scoured the biosphere. This transformation, however, was also the dawn of a new era. The rising oxygen paved the way for aerobic respiration, a far more efficient energy-producing pathway. It was a brutal weeding out, a cosmic cleansing that cleared the stage for organisms that could harness this new, aggressive element. The very composition of the rocks began to change, with iron minerals oxidizing and precipitating out of the oceans, forming the banded iron formations that stand as silent witnesses to this dramatic atmospheric shift. This event, spanning hundreds of millions of years, was a crucible, forging a new kind of planet and a new kind of life. But the fires of change were far from extinguished. The very oxygen that became a building block for complexity also plunged the planet into an unprecedented chill, a frozen slumber that would test the limits of survival. The world, having grappled with an atmospheric revolution, then faced a chilling transformation as oxygen levels continued to climb, a phenomenon known as the Paleoproterozoic glaciations began. These were not mere ice ages as we understand them today, but periods of extreme, planet-spanning glaciation. Evidence locked within ancient rock strata suggests that the Earth may have been covered, from pole to pole, in a thick, suffocating blanket of ice. This snowball Earth scenario, a dramatic consequence of atmospheric shifts and potentially changes in solar luminosity, would have presented an almost insurmountable challenge for life. Surface waters would have frozen solid, trapping everything beneath a crystalline shield. Yet life, as it had shown in its earliest stirrings, possessed an astonishing tenacity. Deep within the oceans, perhaps near the lingering warmth of hydrothermal vents, or in subglacial pockets of liquid water, life likely persisted, a tiny ember glowing in the vast, frozen dark. These glaciations were not solely a destructive force. They also profoundly reshaped the planet's geology and chemistry, setting the stage for further evolutionary leaps. In the aftermath of these frigid epochs, a new form of cellular life began to emerge, a monumental step in biological history. For billions of years, life had been exclusively microbial, composed of simple prokaryotic cells, lacking a true nucleus and complex internal structures. But the Proterozoic witnessed the genesis of the eukaryote. These were cells of a different order, larger, more complex, with specialized organelles like mitochondria for energy production, and crucially, a membrane-bound nucleus housing the cell's genetic material. This evolutionary innovation was not a sudden appearance, but a gradual unfolding, likely involving endosymbiosis, where one prokaryotic cell engulfed another, and the engulfed cell evolved into a specialized organelle. This cellular complexity was a prerequisite for everything that followed, a profound rearrangement of the biological blueprint that enabled the development of multicellularity and, eventually, the diverse forms of life we see today. The slow breath of oxygen had created the conditions necessary for these more sophisticated cellular engines. But even these advancements could not entirely escape the planet's extreme climatic swings. The story of the Proterozoic is one of profound contrasts. The exhilaration of new biological complexity and the crushing despair of global ice following the initial oxygenation and the Paleoproterozoic glaciations. The Earth entered another, even more severe phase of freezing. The Neoproterozoic era was marked by a series of snowball Earth events, periods where ice sheets may have extended to the equator, leaving only a narrow band of unfrozen ocean around the tropics. These were times of immense stress, pushing life to its absolute limits. Yet each time the planet emerged from its icy shell, life seemed to rebound with renewed vigor, often accompanied by further evolutionary diversification. The ultimate resolution of these global glaciations is still a matter of intense scientific debate, but it likely involved a complex interplay of geological processes, such as increased volcanic activity releasing greenhouse gases, and perhaps even biological feedback mechanisms. These cataclysmic glaciations, while appearing to be a dead end, ultimately acted as powerful selective pressures, paving the way for the emergence of more complex life forms and setting the stage for the Cambrian explosion to come. And as the Earth eventually thawed from these deep freezes, a new dynamic was set in motion, a preparation for the explosion of life that would soon follow. But to understand that prelude, we must first delve into the mysteries of how life evolved within these harsh planetary cycles, leading us to the enigmatic origins of multicellularity. The Earth, having shaken off the deep chills of the Neoproterozoic glaciations, found itself in a period of profound transition. The stage was set not for sudden, explosive change, but for a slow, quiet unfolding. In the wake of cataclysmic ice, the planet began to breathe again, and life, in its persistent, ingenious way, began to experiment with new forms. This was the Ediacaran period, a time when the first complex multicellular organisms emerged from the deep oceans and spread across the seabed. They were unlike anything that had come before, and in many ways, unlike anything that would follow. These were the Ediacaran biota, a collection of soft-bodied creatures that left behind impressions in the ancient rocks. Like ghosts imprinted in stone, they appeared in the fossil record a few 100 million years before the Cambrian explosion, a quiet preamble to the grand spectacle of diversification. Their forms were otherworldly: quilted discs, fronds that swayed like ferns, and intricate networks of tubes. They often lay sessile on the seafloor, vast colonies of strange architectures. Imagine a world painted in muted tones, where the dominant life forms were these alien geometries. There were no predators as we understand them, no hard shells to defend or to pierce. The Ediacaran seafloor was a landscape of slow, gentle existence. These organisms likely absorbed nutrients directly from the surrounding water, or through symbiotic relationships with microbes. They represent a radical departure from the single-celled life that had dominated for billions of years, a bold step into the realm of macroscopic, organized life. The mystery deepens when we consider their place in the tree of life. Scientists have long debated their true identity. Were they the direct ancestors of the animals that would later burst forth in the Cambrian? Or did they represent a separate evolutionary experiment, a branch that ultimately withered away, leaving only these enigmatic whispers in the rock? Their unique body plans do not easily fit into the phyla that define modern animal life. Could these represent failed experiments in multicellularity, or a different strategy for survival entirely? The absence of hard parts, the peculiar growth patterns, and the sheer strangeness of their forms have fueled decades of paleontological inquiry. They are a puzzle, a testament to the vast, uncharted territories of evolutionary possibility. The Ediacaran biota offer a glimpse into a world where the fundamental rules of life were still being written. Their existence underscores that evolution is not a linear march toward a predetermined outcome, but a branching, experimental process. These soft, strange forms clinging to the seafloor were the first complex multicellular organisms to truly inhabit Earth in a significant way. They lived and died, leaving behind impressions that would become some of our oldest clues to complex life. These impressions, these ancient imprints, speak of a world poised on the brink. They tell us life had discovered a new way to be, a way to build intricate structures from many cells. But their legacy, their ultimate connection to the creatures that followed, remains shrouded in the dust of deep time. The question remains, what forces urged life beyond these placid, quilted forms and into the vibrant, dynamic ecosystems that were about to bloom? To seek the answer, we must examine the very foundations of this impending change, a shift that would redefine the oceans and the very fabric of life itself, leading us to the singular event known as the Cambrian explosion. The world had teemed with soft, enigmatic forms for eons, a quiet prelude to a revolution. Then, almost in the blink of an unfathomable eye, the fossil record ignites. It is a moment so profound, so rich with new forms. It is called the Cambrian explosion. Over a geological instant, a staggering array of entirely new body plans, the blueprints for most of the animal families that exist today, burst forth. The placid, quilted carpets of the Ediacaran gave way to a vibrant, almost violent, blossoming of life. It is as if the very springs of evolution, held back for billions of years, suddenly burst open, flooding the nascent oceans with an explosion of novelty. But what ignited this sudden efflorescence? What unlocked this unprecedented wave of evolutionary innovation, transforming the quiet seas into a complex, dynamic theater of life? The most striking change, the one that makes the Cambrian strata so distinct from those beneath, is a material one. Life found a new way to build, a way to armor itself. Suddenly, the fossil record is not just impressions in mudstone, but the calcium carbonate whispers of shells, the chitinous echoes of external skeletons, the stony remnants of internal scaffolding. This development of hard parts is a watershed moment. Before the Cambrian, complex body plans were largely soft, ephemeral. Now, creatures possessed the means to protect themselves, to burrow, to swim with greater purpose, and to anchor themselves in new ways. This sudden appearance of mineralized structures is not a mere cosmetic change. It represents a fundamental shift in the biological toolkit. It allowed for new modes of locomotion, new strategies for feeding, and new avenues for defense. Imagine a world where suddenly the ground beneath your feet, or rather the seabed, is no longer just soft mud, but a substrate capable of being gripped, of being dug into. This paved the way for creatures to burrow, creating complex subterranean networks, and for others to build defensive shells, transforming the predator-prey dynamic. But the perfection of these hard parts, their sudden ubiquity, still hints at a deeper, more urgent cause. What evolutionary pressures could possibly favor such a rapid and widespread adoption of mineralization, a process requiring significant metabolic investment? The secrets of this transformation are etched not just in isolated finds, but in places where the veil of time is remarkably thin. These are the Lagerstätten fossil graveyards of astonishing preservation, and among them, the Burgess Shale stands as a beacon. Here in the Canadian Rockies, compressed layers of ancient seafloor reveal a menagerie of creatures so alien, so wonderfully bizarre, they defy easy categorization. Sponges with complex internal structures, worm-like organisms with segmented bodies and grasping appendages, early arthropods with intricate exoskeletons, and forms so unlike anything alive today that they spark endless debate. These sites are more than just collections of fossils. They are windows into a world where evolutionary experiments ran wild. The exquisite detail preserved in places like the Burgess Shale, the Chengjiang biota in China, and the Sirius Passet fauna in Greenland show us not just the winners of the evolutionary race, but the myriad of strange and wonderful forms that were also trying their luck. We see creatures with multiple limbs, with strange sensory organs, with feeding mechanisms that seem to belong to a dream. The sheer diversity, the profusion of unique body plans is overwhelming. It suggests a period of intense experimentation, a time when life was not yet constrained by the established lineages we recognize today. But why this sudden profusion of forms? And why are these exceptional sites so crucial to understanding this pivotal moment? The silent ballet of life in the Cambrian seas was not a gentle waltz. It was a high-stakes dance, a perpetual arms race between those who sought to consume and those who sought to survive. The emergence of hard parts, particularly jaws and piercing appendages for predators and protective shells for the prey, suggests a coevolutionary feedback loop. Predators evolved new ways to hunt, to bypass defenses, to crack open armored bodies. In turn, prey evolved thicker shells, sharper spines, more elaborate evasive maneuvers. This escalating cycle of attack and defense would have been a powerful engine, driving rapid diversification as species specialized to exploit new niches or to evade newly evolved threats. This dynamic interaction between predator and prey would have created a constant pressure for innovation. A new defensive strategy could open up a new ecological space for prey. A new hunting technique could create a demand for specialized sensory organs or faster locomotion in predators. It is a biological tug of war played out on the seabed that would have spurred the development of an astonishing array of adaptations. The fossil record, with its earliest hints of grasping claws and crushing mandibles, whispers of a world where survival depended on being just a little bit faster, a little bit tougher, a little bit more cunning than the next organism. But this arms race, however potent, is only part of the story. What other deeper forces might have been at play, shaping this explosion of life? The sheer speed and scope of the Cambrian explosion have led to a multitude of hypotheses, each attempting to reconcile the abruptness seen in the rocks with the gradualism often observed in more recent evolutionary events. Some theories point to crucial genetic innovations, perhaps the evolution of new regulatory genes, like the homeobox genes that control body plan development, provided the latent potential for such rapid diversification. These genetic toolkits, once in place, could unlock the synthesis of a vast array of new forms with relative ease. Other explanations focus on environmental catalysts. A significant increase in oceanic oxygen levels could have provided the metabolic fuel for larger, more complex, and more active organisms. Changes in ocean chemistry, perhaps an increase in calcium and phosphate availability, might have facilitated the widespread evolution of biomineralization, or perhaps a combination of these factors. A perfect storm of genetic readiness and environmental opportunity converged to ignite this period of unprecedented evolutionary ferment. To truly grasp the Cambrian explosion, we must delve deeper into these proposed mechanisms, searching for the ultimate triggers that rewrote the very definition of animal life. And to do that, we must understand the intricate interplay of biological innovation and planetary change that characterized this epoch. The Cambrian explosion had undeniably painted the Earth's oceans with a vibrant new palette of life. Yet the very success of this burst of creation hinted at further transformations, at shifts in the planet's deep rhythms that would sculpt life's trajectory in ways even more profound. The fossil record, speaking in its silent, stony language, begins to reveal the next grand act. As the Cambrian faded, a new era dawned, the Ordovician period, a vast stretch of geological time, some 485 to 443 million years ago, witnessed not just an expansion of existing forms, but a fundamental reordering of marine ecosystems. Life began to truly colonize the seas, not just in variety, but in sheer density and complexity. The world was changing, and life was changing with it, building intricate worlds within the watery depths. The diversification of marine invertebrates reached breathtaking heights. Trilobites, those ancient armored arthropods that had emerged in the Cambrian, continued to dominate, evolving into myriad forms adapted to different niches. Their segmented bodies and hardened exoskeletons were evidently a winning design, allowing them to scuttle across the seafloor, burrow into the sediment, or even drift in the water column. But they were no longer alone. brachiopods, shelled creatures superficially resembling clams, experienced a remarkable proliferation. These filter feeders, with their intricate lophophores for straining food from the water, became incredibly abundant, forming dense beds on the seafloor. Cephalopods, the intelligent predators of the mollusk family, began to assert their dominance. Nautiloids, with their coiled shells and active hunting strategies, became apex predators. Their streamlined forms and jet propulsion allowing them to patrol the open waters. The Ordovician was a period of builders, of life actively reshaping its environment. This era saw the first truly complex reef structures emerge. Unlike the modern coral reefs, these Ordovician reefs were constructed by a diverse community. Early corals, along with sponges, algae, and bryozoans, began to secrete calcium carbonate, creating the stony frameworks that provided shelter and sustenance for countless other organisms. These were not mere accumulations of skeletons, but elaborate, three-dimensional habitats. Within their nooks and crannies, small crustaceans, worms, and an astonishing variety of shelled organisms found refuge. The development of these reefs was a pivotal moment. It represented a profound shift in the way life interacted with the planet, moving from simply existing within environments to actively constructing them, thereby amplifying the carrying capacity of the oceans and fostering even greater biodiversity. This epoch, the Ordovician, is often referred to as the Great Ordovician Biodiversification Event. It was a period of runaway success for marine life, a sustained surge in the number of species and the complexity of ecosystems. What fueled this extraordinary blossoming? Several interconnected factors likely played a role. The continuous evolution of new body plans and life strategies, building on the foundations laid in the Cambrian, continued unabated. New feeding guilds emerged, and existing ones became more specialized. The oceans, now teeming with life, were also becoming more dynamic. The seafloor was being churned by burrowing organisms, and the water column was filled with planktonic life, providing a rich food source for filter feeders. The Ordovician saw the Earth's continents in motion, and their drift influenced ocean currents and nutrient distribution. Changes in the chemical composition of seawater, perhaps driven by increased volcanic activity or weathering of newly exposed land masses, could have provided essential minerals for shell and skeleton formation. It was a time of incredible evolutionary experimentation, a period where life seemed to explode outwards in every conceivable direction, filling every available niche. However, even periods of immense growth are subject to the Earth's capricious geological cycles. The extraordinary expansion of life during the Ordovician was ultimately brought to a stark halt by a devastating event. As the period drew to a close, the planet underwent a dramatic climatic shift. The end Ordovician extinction was the second largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, rivaled only by the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. This catastrophic loss of marine species was not a slow decline, but a relatively rapid die-off. The primary culprit is believed to have been a period of intense glaciation. As ice sheets formed and expanded, vast amounts of water were locked away, causing sea levels to plummet. This had a devastating effect on shallow marine environments, the very nurseries of Ordovician life. Coastal habitats were destroyed, and fragmented ecosystems became isolated. Then, as the glaciers eventually melted, sea levels rose again, flooding the continental shelves, but also drastically changing ocean chemistry and temperature. This dual blow of glaciation, sea level fluctuation, and subsequent environmental upheaval proved too much for many of the newly evolved and highly specialized Ordovician species. The vibrant tapestry of marine life was severely torn, leaving behind a starkly altered world. But even in devastation, the seeds of future life persist. The Ordovician extinction, while brutal, set the stage for the next chapter, prompting us to consider how life adapts and reemerges from such profound planetary upheaval. And to understand this resilience, we must turn our gaze to the age of fishes that followed. The echoes of the Ordovician extinction still resonated, a profound silence in the seas where vibrant life once teemed. Yet from this apparent stillness, a fundamental shift was already underway, an evolutionary innovation that would forever alter the balance of power. Life, always restless, was about to gain a formidable new tool. The very act of survival, the desperate scramble for resources, had spurred a remarkable adaptation. The jaw. Imagine a world where mouths were merely openings, passively filtering food or absorbing nutrients. This was the reality for much of early vertebrate life. Then, over a span so vast it dwarfs human comprehension, a set of gill arches, once dedicated to respiration, began to transform. They thickened, strengthened, and acquired the ability to clench, to grasp, to tear. This was not a sudden, miraculous event, but a gradual refinement, a slow sculpting by the relentless hand of natural selection. The evolution of jaws marked a profound divergence, creating a clear divide between those who could actively pursue and consume prey, and those who remained passive inhabitants of their environment. This single innovation unlocked entirely new ecological niches. Predators could now chase, capture, and dismantle their quarry. Prey species, in turn, were forced to evolve new defenses, faster movements, and better camouflage. The seas, previously a realm of slow drifts and diffuse feeding, began to pulse with a new dynamism, a nascent struggle for dominion that would shape the course of vertebrate evolution for eons to come. To truly grasp the impact of this evolutionary leap, we must delve deeper into the lineage bore these revolutionary jaws, tracing their ascent in the nascent Silurian seas. As the oceans began to stabilize after the Ordovician cataclysm, a quiet revolution was also taking root on the land. While marine life recovered, the terrestrial realm remained a barren expanse, a vast, unexplored frontier. Yet the very air, carrying moisture and nutrients, beckoned. Life, in its persistent drive to expand, began to explore this new domain. But it faced immense challenges. Without the buoyancy of water, gravity became a formidable obstacle. Desiccation was a constant threat, and the transport of nutrients and water within an organism, a role efficiently handled by diffusion in water, required a more sophisticated solution. This is where another pivotal innovation emerged, one that would transform the very face of the planet: vascular tissues. Plants, in their slow, patient spread from the water's edge, developed specialized systems. Xylem, like tiny pipes, began to transport water and minerals from the soil upwards. Phloem then took over, distributing sugars produced by photosynthesis throughout the plant. This internal plumbing allowed plants to defy gravity to a greater extent than ever before. They could grow taller, reaching for sunlight, and more importantly, they could anchor themselves more firmly in the soil. With the development of these vascular systems, a new possibility emerged. Plants could now colonize further inland, away from the constant dampness of the shore. They began to create their own microclimates, trapping moisture and providing shelter. This was not yet the verdant world we know, but the very first tentative steps towards a terrestrial ecosystem. The building blocks were being laid for a profound transformation of the land, a transformation that would, in turn, reshape the atmosphere itself. To witness the dawn of these early plant communities and their burgeoning influence, we must look to the early Silurian landscape. The persistent efforts of early plants to conquer the land did not go unnoticed. As they spread, their presence fundamentally altered the environment. They began to stabilize soils, preventing erosion and creating richer substrates. Their roots, delving into the earth, broke down rocks, releasing vital minerals. And as they grew, they began to interact with another group of pioneers, making their own tentative foray onto land. Arthropods, primitive insects, and other invertebrates, drawn by the new food sources and shelter, began to explore this emerging terrestrial world. But it was the plants themselves that truly began to sculpt the landscape. What started as small, creeping forms, barely rising above the soil, began to evolve more complex structures. We see the emergence of early lineages with rudimentary leaves and stems, precursors to the towering trees of future eras. These were not the dense, sprawling forests of the Devonian, but rather scattered collections of primitive plants, perhaps resembling small, hardy shrubs or dense mats of fern-like growth. Yet their collective impact was significant. they began to form the very first, albeit nascent, forests. These early forests, even in their simplicity, had a profound effect on the atmosphere. Through photosynthesis, they began to draw carbon dioxide out of the air and release oxygen. This process, slow and incremental at first, would eventually lead to a dramatic increase in atmospheric oxygen levels, a change that would have far-reaching consequences for both terrestrial and marine life. The land was no longer a passive recipient of life, but an active participant in shaping the planet's chemistry. To understand the full impact of this emerging terrestrial vegetation and its influence on global processes, we must look to the skies and the seas it began to affect. As the Silurian gave way to the Devonian, the evolutionary momentum accelerated, particularly in the watery depths. The innovation of jaws, first seen in the late Silurian, exploded in diversity. Life in the oceans, no longer confined to passive filtering, entered an era of active predation and defense. These were the true beginnings of the age of fishes, a period that would see the seas teem with forms never before imagined. The waters became a stage for a grand evolutionary drama, with new contenders vying for dominance. Among the most striking developments were the armored fish, the placoderms. These were not the sleek, cartilaginous sharks of today, but robust, heavily armored creatures, their heads and bodies encased in thick bony plates. Like living tanks, some of these placoderms, like the formidable Dunkleosteus, grew to astonishing sizes, their powerful jaws capable of crushing bone and shell. They were the apex predators of their time, ruling the Devonian seas with an unyielding, armored might. But it was not just brute force that defined this era. The diversification of jawed vertebrates, known as gnathostomes, was a testament to the power of this single adaptation. From the placoderms to the early ray-finned and lobe-finned fishes, a stunning array of forms emerged. They explored different hunting strategies, from ambush predators to swift pursuers. Some developed filter-feeding mechanisms, while others evolved specialized teeth for crushing or tearing. The oceans were no longer simply a cradle of life, but a vibrant, dynamic ecosystem, a testament to the creative power of evolution, driven by innovation. Yet, even in this era of apparent triumph for jawed vertebrates, the Earth has a way of reminding us of its power to reset the clock, and the Devonian seas would soon face another reckoning, leading us to the late Devonian extinction. Just as the seas seemed to reach a zenith of complexity and dynamism, a shadow fell across the Devonian world. The vibrant ecosystems, so carefully constructed over millions of years, began to unravel, culminating in a significant mass extinction event. This was not a single, sudden blow, but likely a series of environmental crises that reverberated throughout the globe. The very success of some groups, like the flourishing reef builders and the dominant three-jawed fish may have made them particularly vulnerable to widespread ecological collapse. The causes are still debated, but evidence points towards profound environmental changes. A likely factor was the continued proliferation and expansion of land plants. As these early forests grew, they may have led to increased weathering of rocks, drawing down atmospheric carbon dioxide and triggering global cooling. Additionally, the extensive root systems of these plants could have altered nutrient runoff into the oceans, leading to eutrophication and oxygen depletion in some areas, creating vast anoxic dead zones. The impact was particularly severe on marine life. Reef-building organisms, which had thrived throughout much of the Devonian, suffered greatly. Many species of jawless fish, the agnathons, which had persisted since the Ordovician, were also heavily impacted, perhaps outcompeted by the increasingly diverse jawed fishes, or unable to cope with the changing conditions. The intricate web of life in the Devonian seas was severely frayed, with many branches of the evolutionary tree pruned back. This period of decline, the late Devonian extinction, serves as a stark reminder that even periods of great evolutionary flourishing are not immune to planetary upheaval. And to understand the aftermath of this devastation and the life that crawled from the ashes, we must look to the dawn of the Carboniferous. The quiet hum of extinction has faded, replaced by a world reborn under a canopy of green. Following the devastating late Devonian extinction, the Earth began to reassert its ancient rhythms, and a new era dawned. This was the Carboniferous period, a time of profound transformation, a period of immense biological innovation and geological drama that would literally pave the way for future ages. Here, the very foundations of continents began to shift and merge, while life on land took a leap that would echo through eternity. Imagine a world bathed in a perpetual, muggy warmth. The climate of the Carboniferous was largely tropical and subtropical, incredibly humid and remarkably stable. Gone were the extreme temperature swings of earlier eras. This relentless heat and moisture, combined with a rich atmosphere, provided the perfect incubator for a botanical revolution. Vast, shallow inland seas and extensive river deltas crisscrossed the continents. Into these fertile lowlands poured an explosion of plant life. Giant, tree-like ferns, horsetails as tall as modern trees, and alien-looking club mosses dominated the landscape. These were not the delicate flora we know today. They were colossal, robust, and adapted to waterlogged soils. Their sheer abundance was astonishing. Forests of these giant plants carpeted enormous areas, but what truly set this period apart was their reproductive strategy and their relationship with death. Unlike later seed-bearing plants, many Carboniferous plants reproduced via spores. When they died, their massive woody remains, unable to fully decompose in the oxygen-poor, waterlogged conditions of the swamps began to accumulate. Mile upon mile of fallen trunks and branches sank into the mire over millions of years, under immense pressure from sediment accumulating above. These organic layers were transformed. This was the crucible where the fuel for our modern world was forged. Coal. These were not mere deposits. They were entire forests, buried and compressed, holding within them the stored sunlight of a lost age. The sheer scale of these coal swamps is nearly incomprehensible. They represent a planetary scale geological process, a slow breathing of the earth that took ancient sunlight and entombed it for a future we now inhabit. But this vibrant, swampy world was also a stage for a different kind of evolution, one that took to the air as the great ferns and horsetails reached for the sky. Another evolutionary marvel was unfolding in the dense, humid air. For the first time in Earth's history, a new dimension of life began to open up. Flight. And it was the insects, the ancient arthropods, that first conquered the aerial realm. The wings that appeared were not small and delicate. They were vast, membranous structures, stretching with a span that would dwarf any insect alive today. Imagine dragonflies with wingspans of 2 to 3 feet, their shadow passing over the ancient swamps like fleeting clouds. These were the titans of the Carboniferous skies. Why did they grow so large? The prevailing theory points to the atmosphere itself. During the Carboniferous, atmospheric oxygen levels were significantly higher than they are today, perhaps reaching as high as 30% compared to our current 21%. Insects breathe through a system of tubes called tracheae that deliver oxygen directly to their tissues. Higher external oxygen levels would have allowed for more efficient respiration, enabling these creatures to grow to truly gargantuan sizes. These winged giants were not just a novelty. Their presence fundamentally altered terrestrial ecosystems. They opened up new niches for predation and foraging, and their aerial maneuverability provided an escape from terrestrial predators. The ability to fly transformed the simple, ground-based world of the past into a three-dimensional landscape, a world where life could truly ascend. This innovation, so alien to our modern perception of insects, was a pivotal moment, allowing for dispersal, for hunting, and for a new kind of freedom on a planet slowly coming into focus. But as life took to the air, it also continued its ancient journey from the seas. The land, for so long a realm dominated by plants, was becoming increasingly hospitable to animal life. Yet, for creatures tethered to the water, the move to drier ground was a formidable challenge. The Carboniferous was a golden age for these transitional beings, the descendants of the lobe-finned fishes that had begun venturing onto the shores in the Devonian. These were the early tetrapods, the ancestors of all future land vertebrates. These pioneers were a diverse lot, evolving into what we now recognize as the first amphibians. They retained a strong connection to water, needing it for reproduction and to keep their permeable skin moist. Yet they had developed key adaptations for terrestrial existence. Their skeletal structure had evolved to support their bodies against gravity, with stronger limbs and a more robust spine. Their forelimbs, in particular, were becoming more developed, allowing them to crawl and clamber over the damp earth. Their lungs, a crucial innovation for breathing air, were now more efficient, while they could likely still supplement their oxygen intake through their skin. The ability to breathe atmospheric air was a significant advantage. These early amphibians likely resembled salamanders or newts, but on a much larger scale, some reaching lengths of several feet, inhabiting the lush, humid environments of the coal swamps. They were opportunists, feeding on the abundant insect life and scavenging. Their success marked a critical step in the colonization of land, a prolonged experiment that would eventually lead to reptiles, birds, and mammals. This was not a sudden leap, but a slow, arduous transition, a testament to the persistent drive of life to explore every available niche. They were the vanguard, testing the boundaries of a world not yet fully their own. And as these creatures adapted to their new terrestrial homes, the very continents beneath them were undergoing a monumental rearrangement. While life was transforming the surface of the planet, the colossal engines of geology were hard at work deep beneath. The Earth's crust, a mosaic of tectonic plates, was in constant motion. Vast land masses, which had drifted apart for eons, were now being drawn together by the inexorable pull of continental drift. In the southern hemisphere, a supercontinent known as Gondwana, comprising what would eventually become South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and India, was a significant landmass. To the north lay a collection of continents that would form Laurasia, including North America, Europe, and Asia. Throughout the Carboniferous, these great continental blocks were converging. This was a slow, grand ballet of immense scale, a process that took tens of millions of years. The collision of these continental plates was not a gentle affair. It resulted in immense geological stresses, buckling and folding the Earth's crust, creating mountain ranges of unprecedented height. These mountain building events, known as orogenies, were responsible for some of the major geological features we see today. The Appalachians in North America, for example, were formed during these collisions. The immense pressure and heat generated by these tectonic forces also played a role in the formation of valuable mineral deposits, forever altering the geological landscape. As these continents merged, they created a vast, single landmass, a proto-supercontinent that would eventually be known as Pangaea. This continental assembly had profound implications for global climate, ocean currents, and the distribution of life. Vast inland regions were created, further influencing weather patterns and creating diverse new environments. The joining of these ancient lands was more than just a geographical event. It was a geological reordering that set the stage for the next chapter of Earth's history, a chapter where a single, massive continent would dominate the planet. And to understand the consequences of this grand assemblage, we must now turn our gaze to the Permian. The world of the Permian period felt vastly different from the humid, swampy landscapes of the Carboniferous. It was a time shaped by the immense geological force that had just concluded, the formation of Pangaea. Imagine a single, colossal landmass stretching from pole to pole, a planetary quilt stitched together from the continents we know today. This immense unity dramatically reshaped Earth's geography and its climate. Think of the oceans. With so much landmass coalesced, the global ocean surface was significantly reduced. This had a cascading effect on ocean currents, which are the great circulatory systems of our planet. These currents, once diverse and numerous, were simplified, leading to a more stratified ocean with stagnant, oxygen-depleted zones forming in its depths. Inland, the sheer size of Pangaea created vast continental interiors, far from the moderating influence of the sea. This meant drier climates, extended seasons, and a stark shift from the pervasive dampness that had nurtured the Carboniferous forests. Deserts began to spread, and the very nature of life on land began to change in response to this new, arid reality. The implications of this supercontinent are profound, hinting at a world dramatically altered not just in form, but in its very habitability. This new, drier world presented a formidable challenge to the life that had flourished in the Carboniferous swamps. The amphibians, still largely tied to water for reproduction, found their accustomed habitats shrinking. Yet from this pressure, a new form of life began to rise. It was during the Permian that reptiles truly began to assert their dominance. Their evolutionary leap was a remarkable adaptation to the increasingly arid conditions. Unlike amphibians, reptiles evolved a self-contained amniotic egg. This waterproof shell allowed them to lay their eggs on dry land, freeing them from the immediate need for water bodies. Furthermore, their scaly skin provided better protection against desiccation. These were more efficient creatures, better suited to conserving water and navigating a landscape increasingly defined by sun and sand. This allowed them to exploit niches that were becoming inhospitable to their amphibian ancestors. The Permian was a crucible, forging new avenues for vertebrate life. As the swamps receded and deserts expanded, the reptilian form proved itself to be a master of the new terrestrial frontier, a silent harbinger of a future dominated by creatures far more resilient to the drying earth. But this wasn't the only profound change stirring beneath the surface. The grand assemblage of Pangaea and the subsequent shift to drier climates were not the only forces shaping the Permian. Something far more violent was brewing within the Earth itself, an event of almost unimaginable scale that would scar the planet and irrevocably alter the course of evolution. Deep beneath the crust of what is now Siberia, immense plumes of magma began to rise. These were not typical volcanoes. These were flood basalts, colossal outpourings of lava that covered vast swathes of land. The Siberian Traps, as this region is known, became the site of the largest volcanic eruptions in Earth's history. For perhaps 1,000,000 years, molten rock erupted relentlessly, covering an area larger than Western Europe. The sheer volume of lava was staggering, but it was the accompanying gases that proved most devastating. Billions of tons of carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and other toxic compounds were released into the atmosphere. This volcanic inferno choked the skies, triggering runaway greenhouse warming and widespread ocean acidification. It was an environmental catastrophe of planetary proportions, a violent exhalation from the Earth's interior that would have dire consequences for all life on the surface. The stage was set for an unparalleled collapse. The cumulative pressure of these changes the reshaped continents, the arid climates, and the cataclysmic eruptions of the Siberian Traps culminated in the most devastating mass extinction event Earth has ever witnessed. It is known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, or more colloquially, the Great Dying. The scale of this event is almost incomprehensible. Estimates suggest that over 90% of marine species vanished. Entire groups of organisms, from trilobites to ancient reef builders, were wiped out. The vibrant diversity of the Paleozoic oceans was extinguished, leaving behind a desolate seabed. On land, the toll was also staggering. Around 70% of terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared. The forests that had once carpeted the globe were decimated. It was a planetary reset, a moment when the intricate web of life was torn apart, leaving only the hardiest remnants to rebuild. Life on Earth was fundamentally and irrevocably altered. The world that emerged from the ashes of the Great Dying was a simpler, starker place, a blank canvas awaiting new forms to fill it. But to truly grasp the magnitude of this loss, we must explore the lingering questions about the precise mechanisms that caused such widespread devastation and the specific environments that were most affected. This leads us directly into understanding the aftermath of such profound environmental upheaval and the slow, arduous process of recovery that awaited the surviving life forms, a process that would begin in the Triassic. The dust began to settle, but the world that emerged was a shadow of its former self. The Great Dying had scoured the Earth, leaving behind a scarred landscape and a profound silence where vibrant ecosystems once thrived. The Triassic period, spanning roughly 252 to 201 million years ago was a time of slow, painstaking recovery, a period defined by its sheer resilience in the face of overwhelming loss. Imagine a world bleached by the sun, a landscape sculpted by wind and infrequent, violent rains. The atmosphere, still recovering from the volcanic outgassing of the Siberian traps, was likely thin on oxygen and thick with carbon dioxide, creating a greenhouse effect that baked the land. Oceans, depleted of life and circulation, might have been unusually warm and anoxic in their depths. This was not a world for lush forests or teeming waterways. Instead, life clung to existence in hardy, opportunistic forms. Drought-resistant plants, like ferns and cycads, began to re-establish themselves, their tough leaves and deep roots a testament to survival. On land, primitive reptiles, already adapted to drier conditions, found their niche. A notable group, the archosaurs, began their ascent. These were the forerunners of many iconic lineages, including crocodiles, pterosaurs, and crucially, the dinosaurs. The archosaurs were a diverse bunch. Some were amphibious, like the early crocodilomorphs, with their armored bodies and powerful jaws, perfectly suited for ambush in shallow waters or along riverbanks. Others were more terrestrial, small and quick, their scaly hides protecting them from the harsh sun. It was a world where survival favored the adaptable, the quick, and the tough. Even as life slowly crept back, a subtle tension remained, a sense that the stage was being set for something new, something that had been waiting in the wings for its chance to emerge from the shadows of extinction. But the question lingered: what kind of world would these survivors truly inherit? And what forces would shape their ultimate destiny as the Triassic moved towards its close? Amidst this scarred but slowly healing world, a new lineage began to stir, small and unassuming at first. These were the earliest dinosaurs, a group that would eventually redefine the planet's dominant fauna. They were not the colossal beasts of later eras, but rather agile, bipedal creatures, often no larger than a turkey or a large dog. Their skeletons, still relatively gracile, hinted at a metabolism that was perhaps more active than their reptilian cousins, a potential for sustained movement that would prove invaluable. These were the Saurischians and Ornithischians, the two fundamental branches of the dinosaur family tree. The Saurischians, meaning lizard-hipped, would include the long-necked sauropods and the fearsome theropods. The Ornithischians, or bird-hipped, would encompass a vast array of herbivores, from armored ankylosaurs to duck-billed hadrosaurs. But in the Triassic, they were all just beginning. Their small size was an advantage. They could dart through the undergrowth, escape predators, and find sustenance in a world where food sources were still recovering. Their bipedal stance freed their forelimbs for other tasks, whether for grasping prey, balancing, or perhaps even for early forms of communication or display. It was a subtle evolutionary advantage, a whisper of the power that would soon roar across the continents. These early dinosaurs were not yet kings, but they were certainly the coming aristocracy, patiently waiting for the right moment to claim their throne. The question now is, what other groups were rising alongside them, and how did their evolutionary paths intertwine? Understanding this leads us to the vibrant diversification of the archosaurs. The archosaurs, as we mentioned, were an incredibly successful group in the Triassic, and their story is deeply intertwined with the rise of the dinosaurs. This broad category of diapsid reptiles included not only the true dinosaurs, but also their close relatives. Among the most prominent were the crocodilomorphs, the ancient ancestors of modern crocodiles. These were often semi-aquatic predators, their powerful jaws and armored bodies well suited to the river systems and shallow seas that were slowly returning. Then there were the pterosaurs, the first flying vertebrates. These graceful creatures, with their leathery wings, soared through the Triassic skies, their presence a stark contrast to the earthbound reptiles below. Their evolution from archosaur ancestors demonstrated the remarkable adaptive radiation of this group, pushing into aerial niches that had been largely vacant since the extinction of flying reptiles in earlier eras. And within the broader archosaur family, we see the early diversification of the dinosaurs themselves. The small, bipedal dinosaurs we discussed were part of this larger archosaurian explosion. It was a period of intense evolutionary experimentation. Different archosaur lineages explored various lifestyles, from swift terrestrial hunters to lumbering herbivores and oceanic predators. This period of diversification wasn't just about survival. It was a vibrant testament to life's capacity to innovate and fill every available ecological space. But even as life diversified, a specter of past destruction loomed, and a new, unexpected turn of events would soon redefine the very dominance of these emerging creatures. To understand why the reign of the dinosaurs would become so absolute, we must look at another pivotal moment of planetary upheaval, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Just as life seemed to be finding its footing, just as the archosaurs and the nascent dinosaurs were beginning to carve out their territories, the Earth stirred once more towards the very end of the Triassic period. Approximately 201 million years ago, another significant extinction event swept across the globe. This was not as devastating as the Permian-Triassic cataclysm, but its impact was profound, particularly in clearing the stage for the true ascendancy of the dinosaurs. The causes of this Triassic-Jurassic extinction are still debated, but likely involved massive volcanic activity, similar to the Siberian traps, but this time associated with the rifting of the supercontinent Pangaea. This volcanic outpouring would have released enormous amounts of greenhouse gases, leading to rapid global warming, ocean acidification, and significant disruptions to climate and sea levels. Terrestrial life suffered greatly, with many large reptile groups that had thrived in the Triassic, including early crocodilomorphs and a group called the Crurotarsans, being severely impacted or wiped out. However, the dinosaurs, at this point still relatively small and adaptable, weathered the storm. Crucially, many of their ecological competitors were eliminated. The vacuum left by these extinctions allowed the already diversified dinosaur lineages to expand rapidly into the newly available niches. The Age of Giants was about to begin, not because they were inherently superior in the Triassic, but because the environment, yet again, responded to immense geological forces, clearing the path for their eventual dominance. To truly grasp the scale of this coming era and the creatures that would define it, we must now step into the heart of the Jurassic, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction event, a fiery reset button pressed by geological upheaval, cleared the shadows and allowed a new dawn to break. This dawn belonged to the dinosaurs, a group of reptiles that had, until this point, been merely one of many successful lineages. Suddenly, the stage was stripped bare, and the slow, inexorable rise of the giants began. The Jurassic period that followed was an epoch defined by an astonishing expansion of life, particularly across the terrestrial and marine realms. It was an age where the very earth seemed to sigh with a slow, seismic breath, reshaping continents and redefining the rules of survival. The most striking characteristic of the Jurassic was the sheer scale of its dominant inhabitants. Dinosaurs, having survived the Triassic purge, now diversified into an array of forms that would capture the imagination for eons to come. Two major branches of the dinosaur family tree began to flourish. The Saurischians, or lizard-hipped dinosaurs, included the behemoths that would become legendary. These were the sauropods, creatures of immense stature with long necks and tails, like Brontosaurus and Diplodocus, that grazed on the lush vegetation blanketing the planet. Imagine these colossal beings, their footsteps resonating like distant thunder, their necks reaching towards the canopy of cycads and ferns. Their sheer mass was a defense against most predators. But the Jurassic was not solely the domain of plant eaters. Alongside them evolved the Ornithischians, or bird-hipped dinosaurs. This group was characterized by a remarkable diversity of defensive structures. Armored dinosaurs, such as Stegosaurus, with its iconic plates and tail spikes, lumbered through the undergrowth. Others, like the early members of the Ceratopsian lineage, began to develop their characteristic frills and horns. The landscape was a tapestry of these ancient titans, each adapted to its specific niche, a testament to the evolutionary explosion that followed the great extinctions. What is often overlooked in this era of colossal reptiles is the subtle, yet profound, redefinition of flight, while enormous dinosaurs dominated the land. A parallel evolutionary journey was unfolding in the skies. The fossil record offers a breathtaking glimpse into the very genesis of birds, the link between theropod dinosaurs, those bipedal carnivores that walked the earth, and the earliest avian forms, is now undeniable. One of the most celebrated fossils of this connection is Archaeopteryx, a creature that seems to blur the lines between reptile and bird. It possessed feathers, flight adaptations, and a wishbone, yet it also retained reptilian features like teeth, claws on its wings, and a long bony tail. This transitional fossil is a smoking gun, revealing that the lineage that would eventually give rise to all modern birds had its roots firmly planted among the theropod dinosaurs of the Jurassic. It's a reminder that evolution rarely presents a clean break, but rather a slow, elegant continuum. As the age of giants unfolded, the very ground beneath their feet was in constant flux. The supercontinent Pangaea, a colossal landmass that had dominated Earth for millions of years, began its ponderous, inevitable breakup. Tectonic plates, driven by the Earth's inner heat, started to tear the ancient continent apart. This process was not a sudden cataclysm, but a slow, grinding schism that would eventually give rise to the Atlantic Ocean. By the Jurassic, Pangaea had largely fractured into two major landmasses: Laurasia in the north, comprising what would become North America and Eurasia, and Gondwana in the south, which would eventually form South America, Africa, Antarctica, Australia, and India. This continental drift had profound consequences for climate and evolution. As the landmasses separated, new coastlines emerged, and ocean currents began to shift. The resulting fragmentation created more diverse environments, influencing the dispersal and isolation of species. Mountain ranges were uplifted along the rifting zones, and volcanic activity became more prevalent, releasing gases that altered the atmosphere. The breakup of Pangaea was not just a geographical event. It was a fundamental reshaping of Earth systems, setting the stage for the distinct evolutionary paths that would emerge on the newly formed continents. While the terrestrial world belonged to the dinosaurs and their evolving avian cousins, the oceans of the Jurassic teemed with their own set of magnificent and often terrifying inhabitants. The marine reptiles, having also survived the Triassic extinctions, entered a period of unparalleled dominance and diversification. These were not dinosaurs, which were primarily terrestrial, but a separate, though related, group of reptiles that had adapted to life in the sea. Among the most successful were the ichthyosaurs. These sleek, dolphin-like creatures were perfectly adapted for life in the water, possessing streamlined bodies, powerful tails for propulsion, and large eyes for hunting in the dim light of the deep. They were viviparous, giving birth to live young at sea, a significant evolutionary step that freed them from the need to return to land to lay eggs. Their fossil remains are found in abundance, a testament to their widespread success throughout the Jurassic oceans. Alongside them swam the plesiosaurs, characterized by their long necks, barrel-shaped bodies, and flippers that allowed them to navigate the seas with grace. Some plesiosaurs, like Elasmosaurus, possessed incredibly elongated necks that could reach prey from a distance, while others, like Plesiosaurus, had shorter, more powerful necks and skulls, embodying the apex predators of the Jurassic seas. These marine reptiles filled the ecological niches that sharks and large bony fish occupy today, ruling the ancient oceans with a primeval majesty. To understand how these lords of the sea navigated their world and the creatures they preyed upon, we must now delve deeper into the heart of the Jurassic seas. The Earth, having endured the fiery trials of the Mesozoic, now entered a new epoch, one marked by the vibrant unfurling of life and a stunning, abrupt end. The Cretaceous period, stretching from approximately 145 to 66 million years ago, would witness the zenith of dinosaurian grandeur and the silent, explosive arrival of a force that would rewrite the planet's destiny. It was a time of profound change, where the very ground beneath our feet began to bloom with an evolutionary innovation that would eventually shape the world we know. The dawn of angiosperms, the flowering plants, marked an evolutionary revolution. These plants, with their seeds protected within a fruit, and their astonishing array of visual displays, began to spread across the continents. This was not merely a botanical shift, but a profound ecological one. Their sweet nectar and vibrant petals offered irresistible rewards, fostering a symbiotic dance with insects like bees and butterflies, and attracting larger animals that helped disperse their seeds. This burgeoning coevolutionary arms race, a silent negotiation between plant and pollinator, painted the landscapes with colors never before seen. The ancient forests, once dominated by ferns and conifers, began to diversify, offering new niches and new food sources. This floral explosion provided sustenance for an ever-increasing array of herbivores, fueling the incredible diversity and size of dinosaurs. Among the most iconic figures to emerge from this era were the titans of the late Cretaceous. Tyrannosaurus rex, the tyrant lizard king, strode across the North American continent, its massive jaws capable of crushing bone, a superlative predator perfectly adapted to its role. Its very existence speaks of a world teeming with prey. And what prey it was! Triceratops, the three-horned face, with its formidable frill and piercing horns, represented the pinnacle of herbivorous defense. These magnificent creatures grazed in herds, their presence a testament to the rich tapestry of life that the flowering plants had helped to weave. The relationship between predator and prey between T. Rex and Triceratops was a brutal ballet, a constant push and pull that shaped the evolution of both species. But this vibrant, dynamic world, this acme of dinosaurian evolution, was about to face an unimaginable challenge. The very ground they walked upon, the air they breathed, was poised for a cataclysmic transformation, a sudden, violent punctuation, mark in the grand narrative of life. And to understand the scale of what followed, we must turn our gaze to the heavens. The Cretaceous period, a time of unparalleled dinosaurian splendor, and the quiet rise of flowering plants, was abruptly and violently interrupted by an event of cosmic proportions. The Chicxulub impactor, an asteroid or comet estimated to be between 10 to 15 kilometers wide, struck the Yucatan Peninsula with unimaginable force, unleashing energy equivalent to billions of atomic bombs. This was no mere geological tremor, but a planetary scar. The immediate aftermath of the impact was a scene of utter devastation. The sheer force of the collision vaporized rock and ejected molten material miles into the atmosphere, instantly igniting widespread wildfires that swept across continents, reducing forests to ash. Shockwaves rippled through the Earth's crust, triggering massive earthquakes and volcanic activity. But the inferno was only the beginning. The immense energy transferred to the oceans generated colossal tsunamis, waves hundreds of meters high that surged inland, scouring coastlines and obliterating everything in their path. These were not the gentle tides of the Jurassic seas, but monstrous walls of water bent on erasure. As if this were not enough, the impact threw colossal amounts of dust, soot, and debris high into the stratosphere. This vast cloud of particulate matter encircled the globe, blocking out the sun's life-giving rays for months, perhaps even years. The world plunged into a prolonged, chilling darkness. Photosynthesis, the very foundation of most food webs, ground to a halt. Plants withered and died, and the herbivores that depended on them starved. The intricate web of life, so carefully constructed over millions of years, began to unravel with terrifying speed. This was the KPG mass extinction, a sudden, dramatic end to an era, the reign of the non-avian dinosaurs, which had dominated the planet for over 160 million years, was brought to an abrupt and violent close. They were not alone in their demise. Countless other species, from marine reptiles that had also ruled the seas to countless insects and plants, vanished from the fossil record. It was a reset button for life on Earth, a stark reminder of our planet's vulnerability to the vast, indifferent forces of the cosmos. The devastation was absolute, leaving behind a scarred planet and a silent, waiting world. To comprehend the magnitude of this loss and the fragile beginnings of what emerged from the ashes, we must now examine the immediate aftermath of this cosmic blow. The KPG mass extinction did did not merely end the reign of the dinosaurs, it fundamentally reshaped the biosphere, paving the way for new life to arise from the ruins. The world that emerged from the darkness of the impact winter was a profoundly different place. Vast ecological niches lay empty, the dominant players suddenly gone, leaving a vacuum that smaller, hardier survivors would eventually fill. The immense scale of the extinction meant that entire lineages, which had flourished for millions of years, simply ceased to be. The iconic feathered hunters, the lumbering herbivores, the flying pterosaurs, and the seagoing reptiles all vanished, leaving behind only their stony memories in the Earth's strata. This was not a slow decline, but an ecological collapse occurring at an unprecedented pace. Imagine the silence that fell upon the land, the absence of the familiar roars and rustles. Yet extinction is often followed by opportunity. While the giants fell, smaller creatures, particularly mammals and birds, which had often lived in the shadow of the dinosaurs, proved more resilient. Their smaller size, tendency to hide, and often omnivorous or insectivorous diets allowed many to weather the prolonged period of darkness and scarcity. The burrowing habits of some mammals, for instance, offered protection from the initial impact and the subsequent environmental chaos. The avian dinosaurs, the direct ancestors of modern birds, also demonstrated a remarkable ability to survive. Their capacity for flight allowed them to escape localized devastation and seek out dwindling food resources. Their adaptability and varied diets were crucial in navigating the altered landscapes. The KPG extinction event stands as a stark testament to the fragility of established ecosystems and the profound impact that extraterrestrial events can have on terrestrial life. It was a planetary cleansing, a brutal but ultimately creative act. The world that slowly began to reawaken from its slumber, bathed once more in sunlight, was a world ripe for a new chapter. The stage was set, the old actors gone, for a new cast of characters to emerge and claim their dominion. To understand who these new inheritors were, and the slow, persistent rise that followed this abrupt end, we must now turn our attention to the age that followed, the age of mammals. The silence left by the thunderous footsteps of the dinosaurs was profound, a void that echoed across a scarred planet. But in this quietude, unseen and unheralded, life was already stirring. The great cosmic hammer blow that ended one age had, in its destructive fury, inadvertently cleared a path for another. The survivors, often small and overlooked, now found themselves in a world transformed, a vast ecological canvas awaiting new artists to paint its future. This was the dawn of the Cenozoic era, a time that would become indelibly marked as the age of mammals. For eons, mammals had existed in the periphery, a humble order of creatures that scurried in the undergrowth, navigated nocturnal landscapes, and generally ceded the grand stages to their reptilian overlords. They were opportunistic, adaptable, and possessed a biological inheritance that, while not immediately spectacular, held immense potential. Their warm-blooded nature provided a crucial advantage in a world experiencing dramatic environmental shifts. Their ability to nurse their young, providing consistent nutrition, also fostered greater survival rates among offspring, and crucially, they occupied niches that were not directly competitive with the dominant dinosaurs. When the asteroid struck and the ash clouds choked the sun, it was these adaptable, smaller beings that proved more capable of weathering the storm. The immediate aftermath was a period of immense pressure, a crucible that tested the very limits of survival. But as the dust settled and the skies slowly began to clear, a different kind of world emerged. The massive herbivores and carnivores that had defined the Mesozoic were gone. Entire guilds of ecological roles, from the largest grazing animals to the apex predators, were suddenly empty. It was into these waiting vacuums that the descendants of those hardy survivors began to expand. Their diversification was not a slow, gentle creep, but an explosive radiation, a biological diaspora that reshaped the living world with astonishing speed once the immediate catastrophe passed. This sudden flourishing of mammalian forms is one of the most remarkable chapters in Earth's history. Small, shrew-like ancestors, perhaps no bigger than a mouse, gave rise to an astonishing array of creatures. Horned beasts that grazed the savannas, powerful predators that stalked the forests, and sleek swimmers that explored the newly forming oceans. Each new form represented a solution to a particular environmental puzzle, a testament to the power of natural selection when freed from overwhelming competition and presented with abundant opportunity. The very shapes and sizes of these emerging mammals reflected the diverse landscapes that were coalescing across the globe. The continuing evolution and diversification of avian species also became a defining characteristic of this new era. The feathered dinosaurs, the birds, had already proven their mettle by surviving the extinction event. Now, with the skies largely unburdened by pterosaurs, they too began to explore and exploit the vast potential of aerial existence. Their ability to fly, to escape ground-based threats, and access resources unavailable to terrestrial animals made them incredibly successful. From the smallest songbirds to the largest flightless giants that would roam continents, birds diversified to fill an incredible range of ecological roles. They became masters of the air, their calls a constant symphony in the Cenozoic soundscape. Simultaneously, the relentless, slow dance of the continents continued its inexorable progress. The supercontinent of Pangaea had long since fragmented, but the pieces were still in motion, grinding against each other, pulling apart, and colliding to form the familiar shapes of our modern world. Mountain ranges, jagged and imposing, were thrust upwards as tectonic plates converged. The Himalayas, the Alps, the Andes, these colossal structures were sculpted during the Cenozoic, their formation a direct consequence of the Earth's internal heat engine and the ceaseless drift of its crust. Vast ocean basins widened, carrying continents across the globe like ships on a deep sea. The profound geological and biological shifts of this era were not always gradual. There were periods of dramatic upheaval, moments when the very climate of the planet swung wildly. One such interval, the Paleocene thermal maximum, stands as a stark reminder of the Earth's capacity for extreme climatic events in a relatively short span of geological time. The globe experienced an unprecedented surge in temperature, a warming so intense that it fundamentally altered ecosystems worldwide. This period of extreme global heat created new challenges and opportunities, pushing some species to their limits and driving others to extinction, even as it fostered the evolution of new life forms adapted to the sweltering conditions. Understanding the ripple effects of such a radical shift in climate is crucial to grasping the complex tapestry of life that emerged. But to fully appreciate these challenges, a closer look at the nature of that warming is essential. The Cenozoic era, though perhaps less dramatic in its initial cataclysm than the KPG boundary, presented its own set of profound transformations. The age of the dinosaurs had ended, but the Earth, in its ongoing cycle of creation and destruction, was far from static. The explosive diversification of mammals and birds had reshaped the biosphere, but the planet itself was also undergoing monumental changes. The ongoing ballet of continental drift continued to sculpt the very face of the Earth, creating new landscapes and altering ocean currents, which in turn dramatically influenced global climate. As the continents drifted and mountains rose, the oceans played a vital role in moderating and distributing heat. The shapes of land masses and the vast expanse of water defined global weather patterns, influencing rainfall, wind, and temperature. This dynamic interplay between geology and climate is a constant theme throughout the Cenozoic, a slow, powerful rhythm that dictated the pace of evolution, while periods of cooling and glaciation would eventually punctuate the Cenozoic. The early part of the era saw significant warming trends, punctuated by episodes of extreme heat. One of the most significant of these was the Paleocene thermal maximum, or PETM. This event, occurring about 56 million years ago, was a period of rapid and intense global warming, with temperatures rising by as much as 5 to 8 degrees Celsius, 9 to 14 degrees Fahrenheit across the planet. The evidence for this dramatic warming is found in the geological record, particularly in the isotopic composition of ancient ocean sediments and fossil remains. The cause of the PETM is still a subject of active scientific investigation, but many researchers believe it was triggered by a massive release of carbon, likely from the ocean floor. This carbon, in the form of methane hydrates, or a surge of volcanic activity releasing greenhouse gases, entered the atmosphere, trapping heat and initiating a runaway warming effect. The consequences for life on Earth were profound. Many species, particularly those adapted to cooler climates, struggled to survive. Acidification of the oceans, a direct result of increased atmospheric carbon dioxide, severely impacted marine organisms with shells and skeletons, such as foraminifera and coccolithophores, whose fossilized remains provide crucial data about this period. Terrestrial ecosystems also underwent massive restructuring. Forests in regions that are now temperate or even polar experienced a subtropical or tropical climate, with evidence of palm trees and other warm climate flora found in high latitude areas like Ellesmere Island. Animals faced new pressures, with some migrating towards the poles to escape the heat, while others adapted to the warmer conditions or perished. The PETM serves as a stark warning of the potential for rapid, dramatic climate shifts and their far-reaching consequences for the biosphere. Yet, even amidst such extreme warming events, the ongoing diversification of mammals and birds continued, demonstrating an incredible resilience and adaptability. The creatures that survived these thermal extremes were often those that could find refuge in the deepest waters, the highest mountains, or simply possessed a more generalized physiology. The PETM, while devastating in its localized impacts, was also a crucible that rewarded certain traits and favored specific lineages, subtly steering the course of mammalian and avian evolution. The knowledge gleaned from studying such extreme past events provides a critical lens through which to understand our present climatic challenges. The Cenozoic era, therefore, is not just an epoch of mammalian dominance, but a testament to the Earth's dynamic systems. It is a story of continents in motion, climates in flux, and life's enduring capacity to adapt and diversify. But the story of how life navigated these turbulent climatic waters and the specific evolutionary pathways taken by the newly ascendant mammals leads us to a period of perhaps even more dramatic change. To truly understand the unfolding of the age of mammals, we must now delve into the epochs that followed and the profound shifts in temperature that reshaped the very habitability of the planet. The silence left by the thunderous footsteps of the dinosaurs was profound, a void that echoed across a scarred planet. But in this quietude, unseen and unheralded, life was already stirring. The great cosmic hammer blow that ended one age had, in its destructive fury, inadvertently cleared a path for another. The survivors, often small and and overlooked, now found themselves in a world transformed, a vast ecological canvas awaiting new artists to paint its future. This was the dawn of the Cenozoic era, a time that would become indelibly marked as the age of mammals. For eons, mammals had existed in the periphery, a humble order of creatures that scurried in the undergrowth, navigated nocturnal landscapes, and generally ceded the grand stages to their reptilian overlords. They were opportunistic, adaptable, and possessed a biological inheritance that, while not immediately spectacular, held immense potential. Their warm-blooded nature provided a crucial advantage in a world experiencing dramatic environmental shifts. Their ability to nurse their young, providing consistent nutrition, also fostered greater survival rates among offspring, and crucially, they occupied niches that were not directly competitive with the dominant dinosaurs. When the asteroid struck and the ash clouds choked the sun, it was these adaptable, smaller beings that proved more capable of weathering the storm. The immediate aftermath was a period of immense pressure, a crucible that tested the very limits of survival. But as the dust settled and the skies slowly began to clear, a different kind of world emerged. The massive herbivores and carnivores that had defined the Mesozoic were gone. Entire guilds of ecological roles, from the largest grazing animals to the apex predators, were suddenly empty. It was into these waiting vacuums that the descendants of those hardy survivors began to expand. Their diversification was not a slow, gentle creep, but an explosive radiation, a biological diaspora that reshaped the living world with astonishing speed once the immediate catastrophe passed. This sudden flourishing of mammalian forms is one of the most remarkable chapters in Earth's history. Small, shrew-like ancestors, perhaps no bigger than a mouse, gave rise to an astonishing array of creatures. Horned beasts that grazed the savannas, powerful predators that stalked the forests, and sleek swimmers that explored the newly forming oceans. Each new form represented a solution to a particular environmental puzzle, a testament to the power of natural selection when freed from overwhelming competition and presented with abundant opportunity. The very shapes and sizes of these emerging mammals reflected the diverse landscapes that were coalescing across the globe. The continuing evolution and diversification of avian species also became a defining characteristic of this new era. The feathered dinosaurs, the birds, had already proven their mettle by surviving the extinction event. Now, with the skies largely unburdened by pterosaurs, they too began to explore and exploit the vast potential of aerial existence. Their ability to fly, to escape ground-based threats, and access resources unavailable to terrestrial animals made them incredibly successful. From the smallest songbirds to the largest flightless giants that would roam continents, birds diversified to fill an incredible range of ecological roles. They became masters of the air, their calls a constant symphony in the Cenozoic soundscape. Simultaneously, the relentless, slow dance of the continents continued its inexorable progress. The supercontinent of Pangaea had long since fragmented, but the pieces were still in motion, grinding against each other, pulling apart, and colliding to form the familiar shapes of our modern world. Mountain ranges, jagged and imposing, were thrust upwards as tectonic plates converged. The Himalayas, the Alps, the Andes, these colossal structures were sculpted during the Cenozoic, their formation a direct consequence of the Earth's internal heat engine and the ceaseless drift of its crust. Vast ocean basins widened, carrying continents across the globe like ships on a deep sea. The profound geological and biological shifts of this era were not always gradual. There were periods of dramatic upheaval, moments when the very climate of the planet swung wildly. One such interval, the Paleocene thermal maximum, stands as a stark reminder of the Earth's capacity for extreme climatic events. In a relatively short span of geological time, the globe experienced an unprecedented surge in temperature, a warming so intense that it fundamentally altered ecosystems worldwide. This period of extreme global heat created new challenges and opportunities, pushing some species to their limits and driving others to extinction, even as it fostered the evolution of new life forms adapted to the sweltering conditions. Understanding the ripple effects of such a radical shift in climate is crucial to grasping the complex tapestry of life that emerged. But to fully appreciate these challenges, a closer look at the nature of that warming is essential. The Cenozoic era, therefore, is not just an epoch of mammalian dominance, but a testament to the Earth's dynamic systems. It is a story of continents in motion, climates in flux, and life's enduring capacity to adapt and diversify. But the story of how life navigated these turbulent climatic waters and the specific evolutionary pathways taken by the newly ascendant mammals leads us to a period of perhaps even more dramatic change. To truly understand the unfolding of the age of mammals, we must now delve into the epochs that followed and the profound shifts in temperature that reshaped the very habitability of the planet. The immense continental shifts and the fiery breath of the Paleocene thermal maximum set the stage for a new act in Earth's grand drama. But it is in the most recent chapter, the Quaternary period, that the planet took on a character startlingly familiar to us, a time defined by the rhythmic pulse of ice and the slow, deliberate emergence of our own species. This is the age of repeated glaciations, of landscapes sculpted by ice, and of life forced into new adaptive strategies. It is here, in the crucible of these frigid epochs, that the story of humanity truly begins to unfold. The Pleistocene glacial cycles were not weren't mere episodes of cold, but vast, recurring epochs of profound planetary transformation. Throughout this epoch, colossal ice sheets, kilometers thick, advanced and retreated across the continents with the relentless, slow-motion power of geological forces. These frozen titans reshaped topography with astonishing speed, carving out vast valleys, gouging out lake basins that would later fill with water, and pushing immense moraines of rock and sediment before them. As the ice advanced, it locked away immense volumes of water, causing global sea levels to plummet, exposing land bridges that connected continents once separated by oceans. These bridges allowed for the migration of countless species, reshaping ecosystems and creating a planet of interconnected, yet ever-changing biomes. When the ice retreated, a gradual warming heralded the return of oceans and seas, redrawing coastlines and isolating populations once more. This constant sculpting of the Earth's surface, this ebb and flow of frozen dominion, profoundly influenced the evolutionary trajectories of life. The very ground beneath our feet bears the indelible marks of these ice ages, a silent testament to their power. These cycles of glaciation, however, were not simply a matter of landscape alteration. They were also a powerful selective pressure, favoring species with the resilience to endure harsh winters and the adaptability to thrive in rapidly changing environments. The rhythms of these glacial pulses set the beat for life's unfolding story, pushing it towards new innovations, new forms, and new distributions across the globe. Within this dynamic and often brutal arena of glacial cycles, a remarkable evolutionary journey was underway, tracing the lineage of our own kind. This was the era of hominin evolution, a complex and branching path from our primate ancestors towards the unique characteristics of Homo sapiens. It was a story of adaptation to ever-shifting environments, a slow unfurling of bipedalism, the development of increasingly sophisticated tool use, and the nascent spark of complex social structures. Early hominins, emerging from the forests of Africa, began to walk upright, freeing their hands for new endeavors. This shift freed them from the arboreal world, allowing them to explore open savannas and exploit new resources. Over vast stretches of time, their brains grew larger, their faces became flatter, and their capacity for innovation expanded. Different species, each with their own adaptations and challenges, walked the earth, from Australopithecus to Homo erectus, and then to the Neanderthals, and our own direct ancestors. Each step was a response to the pressures and opportunities of a changing planet. The development of stone tools, fire, and eventually language represent milestones in this evolutionary saga, each a testament to an increasing mastery over their environment. This slow, deliberate march of evolution, driven by necessity and opportunity, laid the groundwork for the emergence of a species unlike any other, a species capable of not just surviving, but shaping the world. Accompanying the rise of these intelligent hominins was a cast of magnificent creatures, the megafauna of the Pleistocene. These were giants of a bygone era, mammoths with their colossal tusks, woolly rhinoceroses with their shaggy coats, saber-toothed cats with their predatory prowess, and giant ground sloths that dwarfed modern bears. These animals were perfectly adapted to the cooler, drier conditions of the glacial periods, roaming vast grasslands and tundras. Their sheer size and power were awe-inspiring, and they played a crucial role in shaping the ecosystems they inhabited. Yet, as the Pleistocene drew to a close and the climate began to warm, a profound and sweeping extinction event swept across the planet. The magnificent megafauna, which had thrived for millennia, began to disappear at an alarming rate. The reasons for this widespread disappearance are still debated by scientists today. Some theories point to the changing climate itself as the primary driver, altering habitats and food sources beyond the animal's ability to adapt. Others emphasize the role of our own ancestors, the nascent Homo sapiens, as increasingly skilled hunters who may have overexploited these large, slower-producing animals. The interplay of these factors, or perhaps an entirely different mechanism, led to the vanishing of these iconic creatures, leaving behind a world of smaller, more adaptable mammals. This sudden and dramatic loss of so many large species fundamentally altered the ecological balance of the planet, a stark reminder of life's fragility and the potential impact of evolutionary pressures. The end of the last great ice age marked not only the return of more temperate climates, but also heralded one of the most significant transformations in human history, the agricultural revolution. As the vast ice sheets receded and grasslands expanded, human populations, still largely nomadic hunter-gatherers, began to experiment with cultivating plants and domesticating animals. This shift from a mobile existence to a settled way of life was profound. It allowed for the accumulation of surplus food, which in turn supported larger populations and the development of permanent settlements. Villages grew into towns, and towns into cities, fostering specialization of labor and the emergence of complex social hierarchies. The consequences of this transition were far-reaching, altering human societies, diets, and our relationship with the natural world. It led to increased population densities, the development of new technologies, and the beginnings of social stratification and organized conflict. While agriculture provided a more stable food supply for many, it also brought new challenges, such as increased disease transmission in crowded conditions and a greater reliance on a limited number of crops. This fundamental shift, born from the environmental changes that followed the great ice ages, set humanity on a new trajectory, one that would eventually lead to the complex civilizations we know today. This epoch, therefore, is not merely a period of ice and giants, but the cradle of human society as we understand it, a testament to our species' adaptive ingenuity in the face of immense environmental change. But to truly grasp the forces that shaped our world and our own becoming, we must now turn our gaze towards the very origins of the planet itself, to the earliest moments of its formation and the primordial fires that forged its existence. We stand now at a precipice, contemplating not just the echoes of past epochs, but the dawning of a new one. The narrative of Earth's deep history has led us through ice ages and the rise of complex life, through the slow, majestic dance of continents. Now we must confront a force that is reshaping this ancient planet with an urgency unlike any before. Ourselves. This is the age of the Anthropocene, a concept that casts humanity not as a mere inhabitant of Earth, but as a profound geological agent, capable of altering the very bedrock of planetary existence. Consider the sheer scale of our influence. We have moved mountains, not with glaciers or tectonic plates, but with machines. We have redirected rivers, not by the slow erosion of millennia, but by dams and canals built in decades. Our cities, vast sprawling organisms of concrete and steel, now cover significant portions of the land surface, a visible scar upon the planet's skin. But this is merely the visible manifestation. Beneath the surface, and in the very air we breathe, our impact is even more profound. We are actively changing the composition of the atmosphere, a subtle yet monumental alteration that has begun to shift the planet's delicate thermal balance. The story of Earth has always been one of change, but the speed and nature of this change are now inextricably linked to the actions of a single species. The climate that has cradled life for millennia is beginning to warp. We witness the warming trends, the melting ice caps, the rising seas, and the increasing ferocity of storms with a growing unease. These are not isolated incidents, but symptoms of a deeper systemic shift, driven by the combustion of ancient sunlight stored in fossil fuels. This process, accelerated over the last 2 centuries, is fundamentally altering the energy budget of our planet. The carbon dioxide we release acts like a thickening blanket, trapping heat and pushing Earth systems into uncharted territory. The delicate rhythms of rainfall, of ocean currents, of seasonal cycles are all beginning to fray. This unraveling extends to the tapestry of life itself. The biodiversity loss in the modern age is staggering. Species, honed by millions of years of evolution, are vanishing at rates that dwarf even the most catastrophic extinction events of prehistory. Habitats are fragmented, ecosystems are simplified, and the intricate web of life, so vital for planetary health, is being torn asunder. Each extinction no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, represents a permanent loss of evolutionary heritage, a silencing of a unique voice in the planet's grand chorus. We are not merely observing this loss, we are the primary drivers. Our relentless expansion and consumption, creating an environment where few can thrive. As we ponder these transformative forces, a profound question emerges. What will be the legacy of the Anthropocene in the deep time of Earth's future? Will the geological record bear witness to a period of unprecedented human creativity and intervention? Or will it mark an era of ecological collapse? The layers of rock yet to be formed will tell a story of our time, a narrative written in altered sediments, in the fossilized remnants of our technological detritus, and perhaps in the stark absence of countless species. The long arc of geological time may view this epoch as a brief, intense flicker, a period where one species briefly held immense power, for better or worse. To understand the true weight of this impact, we must delve into the fundamental forces that shaped our planet's inception. To explore the fiery birth of Earth itself, make sure to subscribe for more videos and hit that notification bell so you never miss a new video. We'll see you in the next one.